My parents sent me a text 3 weeks ago. Don't come to our anniversary party. Only high society guests are invited. No explanation, no apology. Just a quiet reminder that in their world, I didn't belong. For 10 years, I had been the daughter they hid. The one cropped out of family photos. The one introduced as an embarrassment. The one they pretended didn't exist. And this time, they made it official. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that their glamorous celebration was being held inside a historic mansion, restored by my own hands. Every chandelier they admired, I saved. Every doorway they walked through, I rebuilt. Every whisper of elegance surrounding them existed because of me. And before the night was over, a single announcement would expose the truth and shatter their perfect reputation in front of the very elite they were trying to impress. If you've ever been made to feel invisible by the people who were supposed to love you, you're not alone. Subscribe to this channel and stay with me, because some stories aren't just about revenge. They're about dignity, truth, and the moment karma finally arrives. Tell me, what would you do if your own family tried to erase you? Because what happened that night was more shocking than anyone could have imagined. And the most unforgettable moment was yet to come. My name is Colette Owens. I am 32 years old, and for most of my life, I have been invisible to the people who were supposed to see me first, my own family. I grew up just outside Boston in a neighborhood lined with manicured hedges, white colonial homes, and quiet expectations. From the outside, the Owens family looked perfect. We sent out Christmas cards every December, hosted elegant dinner parties, and belonged to a country club where reputation mattered more than truth. Appearances were everything. My mother, Diane Owens, believed that success was measured by admiration. She cared deeply about what people thought, what they wore, where they vacationed, and most importantly, who they became. My father, Richard Owens, was a corporate attorney who valued prestige above all else. He spoke in calculated sentences and carried himself like a man who had never made a mistake. And then there was my older sister, Vivian. Vivian was beautiful, charming, and effortlessly social. She moved through rooms as if she owned them, leaving behind admiration wherever she went. She married well into wealth, into influence, and quickly became the daughter my parents proudly displayed to the world. Vivian was their masterpiece, and I was their disappointment. While she attended charity galas, imposed for magazine-worthy photographs, I spent my time sketching buildings, fascinated by the stories hidden within their walls. I fell in love with architecture, not the sleek glass towers of modern cities, but the quiet dignity of historic structures. Old houses spoke to me. They carried memories, endured storms, and stood resilient against time. But to my parents, my passion seemed insignificant. Oh, Colette does something with old buildings, my mother once told her book club with a polite smile. Renovations, or construction, I think. Her words were always followed by a dismissive laugh. My father was more direct. When you have a real career, he told me, one Thanksgiving, without looking up from his wine glass, we'll talk about putting you back on the Christmas card. Back on. As if I had been erased. The last time I appeared in a family photo was 10 years ago at Vivian's wedding. I stood at the edge of the frame in a second-hand dress, smiling politely, while the camera adored her. Later, I discovered that my mother had cropped me out before posting the picture online. The composition looked better, she explained. I stopped asking questions after that. Over the years, invitations stopped arriving. Holidays passed without phone calls. I learned about family gatherings through social media, watching my own relatives celebrate milestones without me. At first, it hurt. Then it hardened. Eventually, it became normal. I built a life for myself in a modest apartment in Cambridge. It was small, quiet, and filled with things I loved. architecture books stacked in uneven towers, blueprints pinned to the walls, and sunlight spilling across my drafting desk each morning. Everything in that space was earned. Everything was mine. Unlike the approval I had spent years chasing, I worked tirelessly, often late into the night, restoring fragments of history that others overlooked. While developers chased profit, I fought to preserve beauty. While my family chased status, I chased purpose, and somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to impress them. Silence became my refuge, not weakness, but preparation. Because what they never understood was this: I wasn't lost. I wasn't failing. And I certainly wasn't invisible. I was building something lasting, something meaningful, something that would one day speak louder than every insult, every dismissal, and every door they had closed in my face. But none of us knew that yet. Not when the opportunity arrived. Not when my phone rang 3 years ago with a call that would change everything. A historic estate, 150 years old, stood on the brink of demolition. Developers wanted the land. Preservationists had given up. The world had already written its obituary until they called me. And without realizing it, I began restoring more than a building. I began restoring my own worth. I just didn't know that one day the very people who had erased me would celebrate inside the walls I had saved. And when that day came, they would finally see me, whether they were ready or not. 3 years ago, my phone rang on an ordinary Tuesday morning. I almost didn't answer it. At the time, I was hunched over my drafting table in my small Cambridge apartment, coffee growing cold beside me, as I reviewed preservation notes for a crumbling 19th century townhouse. It was quiet work, the kind that rarely made headlines, but preserved the soul of history. Then the phone rang again. Unknown number. I picked up. "Is this Colette Owens?" a calm professional voice asked. "Yes, it is. This is Margaret Caldwell, from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. We've reviewed your work, and we'd like to discuss a project with you." My heart skipped. The Whitmore Estate, a 150-year-old landmark in the heart of Massachusetts, abandoned, deteriorating, and scheduled for demolition. Developers wanted the land. The Historical Society had given up. To most people, it was a lost cause. But not to me. Old buildings never felt like ruins. They felt like stories waiting to be heard. Margaret explained that they needed an architect, someone who understood preservation, not as nostalgia, but as legacy, someone capable of presenting a restoration plan, compelling enough to justify a multi-million-dollar investment. They needed someone who believed the past still mattered. They needed me. For 3 weeks, I barely slept. I immersed myself in faded blueprints, yellowed newspaper archives, and structural surveys dating back to the 19th century. I traced original designs, studied forgotten craftsmanship, and imagined what the estate had once been and what it could become again. When I finally presented my proposal to the board, I didn't just show them a building. I showed them its soul. "This isn't just a restoration," I told them. "It's a resurrection." Silence filled the room. And then Margaret Caldwell smiled. The project was approved. $12 million. The largest and most important opportunity of my career. For 18 months, Whitmore Estate became my entire world. I oversaw every detail personally, often arriving before sunrise and leaving long after sunset. I worked alongside artisans who specialized in Victorian plaster, tracked down rare materials from across the country, and ensured that every restoration honored the original design. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was compromised. Every choice mattered. I spent 3 months restoring the estate's massive oak doors, sanding them by hand until the wood grain re-emerged like a memory returning to life. I sourced antique brass hardware from a specialty shop in Vermont and supervised the reconstruction of stained glass windows that had been shattered decades earlier. Piece by piece, history breathed again. And through it all, I remained silent. Not because I was ashamed, but because I had learned not to seek validation from people who had never intended to give it. My parents never knew. I worked under my firm's name, avoiding publicity and declining interviews. Recognition had never been my goal. Purpose was enough. But destiny has a peculiar sense of irony. 18 months later, as the final scaffolding came down and the chandeliers cast golden light across the restored marble floors, Whitmore Estate stood reborn, more magnificent than it had been in a century. A masterpiece, my masterpiece, and still my family remained unaware. Until the day everything changed. It began with an envelope, heavy cream paper embossed with gold. Inside was a letter from the American Institute of Architects. My hands trembled as I read the words. I had been nominated for the AIA Gold Medal in the Emerging Voice category, one of the most prestigious honors in architecture. My work on Whitmore Estate had been recognized as a defining achievement in historic preservation. I sank into my chair overwhelmed. For the first time in my life, the world saw me, not as an embarrassment, not as an afterthought, but as an architect. As I read the letter again, my eyes drifted to the signature at the bottom. Margaret Caldwell, the same woman my parents would soon invite to their anniversary celebration, hoping to impress her for their own social ambitions. They had no idea she was my mentor, and they had no idea that the building they had chosen as their grand venue was the very one I had saved. The irony was almost poetic. 2 letters arrived on the same day, one recognizing my worth, the other soon to come attempting to erase it, because just hours later, my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. A message from my parents, a message that read, "Don't come. Only high society guests are invited." And in that moment, fate set the stage for a night they would never forget. Nor would I. The text message arrived on a quiet afternoon. Short, polite, ruthless. "Don't come to our anniversary party. Only high society guests are invited. We don't want to explain your situation." I read it once, then again, and a third time, just to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. But there it was, cold and unmistakable. Signed simply Mom and Dad. Not even my name. Just a reminder that in their carefully curated world, I was still an inconvenience they preferred to hide. For a moment, I felt nothing. No anger, no tears. Only a familiar emptiness, the kind that comes when disappointment is no longer surprising. I set my phone down beside the nomination letter from the American Institute of Architects. 2 messages delivered on the same day. One declared me unworthy. The other declared me exceptional. And neither came from the people who had raised me. A week later, my sister Vivian called. She never called unless she wanted something. "Colette," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "I just wanted you to know I tried to convince Mom and Dad to invite you." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. "Tried?" I asked calmly. "Well," she sighed, "you know how they are about appearances. It's not really your scene anyway. Judges, investors, old money families. You'd feel uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. She said it gently, as if she were protecting me. But I knew the truth. She was protecting herself. "What have you been up to lately?" she continued. "Anything exciting?" She was fishing for information, something she could polish into a story for the party. Something harmless. Something unimpressive. "Just work," I replied. "Oh," she said, unable to hide her disappointment. "Still doing the old building thing?" "Yes," I answered quietly. "Still doing that." Well, she laughed lightly. "Take care of yourself. And don't take the party personally. It's really not about you." But it was always about me, specifically about keeping me invisible. 3 days later, my father called. Richard Owens never made casual phone calls. He delivered verdicts. "Colette," he said, his voice crisp and efficient. I understand you received the message about the anniversary party. I did. Good. Your mother and I agreed it's for the best. The guest list includes important people. We want everything to go smoothly. I understand, I replied. He paused, before adding, if you had chosen a more respectable career, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Respectable. The word hung in the air like a judgment. You're intelligent, he continued. You could have been a lawyer, a doctor, or an executive. Instead, you chose to play with old buildings. Play. As if my life's work were a hobby. As if restoring history were no more meaningful than a child's game. Before he hung up, he added almost casually, a representative from the National Trust will be attending. Margaret Caldwell. Your mother hopes to connect with her regarding a charity board. My breath caught. Margaret Caldwell, my mentor, the woman who had trusted me with Whitmore Estate. The irony was staggering. My parents were eager to impress her without realizing she already knew me. Yes, I said softly. I'm sure she'll be impressed. 2 days later, another message arrived, this time from my Aunt Patricia. Colette, dear, I just heard you're going through a difficult time. Your mother said you've been struggling with your mental health. I'm praying for you. My hands froze over the screen. Mental health? Confused, I opened social media. There it was. Comments from my mother's friends filled her latest post. So sorry to hear about your daughter. You're so strong for supporting her, sending prayers. And my mother had liked them. She hadn't merely excluded me. She had rewritten my story. To preserve her reputation, she had painted me as fragile, unstable, broken. I looked around my apartment. The architectural awards lining the shelves, the framed blueprints on the walls, the nomination letter glowing on my laptop screen. Broken, no, successful, independent, invisible only by their design. Here's the truth about lies. They require maintenance. They must be repeated, nurtured, and protected until fiction becomes accepted as fact. My mother had spent years cultivating a myth about her troubled daughter. But myths collapse the moment truth walks through the door. The night before the party, I called Margaret Caldwell, not to complain, but to confirm the timeline for the public announcement. The nomination will be released tomorrow evening, she said warmly. And Colette, there's more. The National Trust has approved a $500,000 grant for the restoration of the governor's mansion. We want you to lead it. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed. Thank you, I whispered. She paused before asking gently, will your family be celebrating with you tomorrow? I hesitated. They have other plans, I replied. Well, she said thoughtfully, I'll be attending an event at Whitmore Estate tomorrow evening. An anniversary party, I believe. If you happen to be there, I would love to congratulate you in person. After we hung up, silence filled the room. My parents had invited my mentor to a celebration in a building I had restored, while telling the world I was too unstable to attend. And at exactly 7:30 p.m. the next evening, the truth would be revealed. I stared at the text message that had tried to erase me. Don't come. A faint smile touched my lips. They believed they had written me out of their story. They had no idea I was about to become its headline. And before the night was over, their lies would crumble in front of everyone they had ever tried to impress. The Whitmore Estate shimmered beneath the evening sky. Soft golden lights illuminated the grand facade, casting a warm glow across the marble steps. White roses lined the entrance, and a string quartet played gentle melodies that drifted through the crisp Massachusetts air. Luxury cars arrived one after another, delivering guests dressed in black tie elegance. Inside, crystal chandeliers sparkled like constellations overhead. Every polished surface reflected perfection. Every detail whispered prestige, and every inch of it existed because of me. Yet I wasn't there, at least not yet. Across town, I sat alone in my Cambridge apartment, watching the evening unfold through the quiet glow of my phone screen. A notification appeared. Vivian's latest social media post, celebrating love and legacy. The caption read, accompanied by a photo of her standing in the grand foyer, draped in designer silk, smiling beneath the chandelier I had fought to restore. I recognized every detail: the hand-painted ceiling, the carved oak banister, the restored marble floors. They admired the beauty. They praised the venue, but they had no idea whose hands had saved it. At exactly 7 o'clock, Margaret Caldwell arrived. She stepped into the foyer with understated grace, her presence commanding attention without demanding it. My mother approached her immediately, her smile polished to perfection. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said warmly, "what an honor to have you here." Margaret nodded politely. "Thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to see Whitmore Estate restored so beautifully." "Oh, yes," my mother replied, waving her hand dismissively. "It truly is magnificent. The event coordinator handled everything." Margaret's gaze lingered on the intricate crown molding and the restored chandeliers. "I had the privilege of working closely with the lead architect," she said calmly. "She was extraordinary." My mother smiled, barely listening. "How fascinating," she replied. "I do hope we meet her someday." Margaret's eyes softened. "I was hoping she would be here tonight. Is Colette running late?" The question hung in the air. For a fraction of a second, my mother froze. "Oh, Colette couldn't make it," she said, with a sympathetic sigh. "She's been struggling. You understand." Margaret's expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "That's strange," she replied evenly. "I spoke with her yesterday. She sounded perfectly well." The first crack appeared. At precisely 7:30 p.m., the truth arrived. Across the room, a guest's phone buzzed. Then another, and another. Whispers spread through the crowd. "Have you seen this?" A journalist from the Boston Globe stared at her screen in disbelief. "The architect who restored this estate has just been nominated for the AIA Gold Medal," she announced. Guests gathered around her. "Who is it?" someone asked. She read aloud, "Colette Owens." Silence rippled through the room. "Owens, the same name as the host?" Within seconds, the article from Architectural Digest began circulating. Phones glowed in elegant hands as guests read the headline, "Colette Owens, the woman reshaping America's architectural heritage." There on every screen was my photograph, standing proudly before the restored entrance of Whitmore Estate. Recognition spread like wildfire. "Isn't that your daughter?" a guest asked my mother. Her smile faltered. "That must be a coincidence," she said quickly. "Our Colette works in construction." Another guest spoke up. "This article says she led the $12 million restoration of this very estate." My father stepped forward, his expression rigid. "There must be some mistake," he insisted. But there was no mistake. Margaret Caldwell moved to the center of the grand foyer, her voice calm yet commanding. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "I would like to say a few words." The room fell silent. 3 years ago, Whitmore Estate was scheduled for demolition. It was saved by a brilliant architect whose dedication and vision brought it back to life. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "That architect is Colette Owens." Gasps echoed through the hall. Margaret continued, her voice filled with admiration. "Every door you have walked through tonight, she restored. Every chandelier above you, she preserved. This magnificent estate stands today because one woman refused to let history disappear." My mother's champagne glass trembled. My father's composure cracked, and the myth they had built for years began to collapse before their very eyes. Margaret held up an envelope embossed with the seal of the American Institute of Architects. "Tonight, Colette Owens has been nominated for the AIA Gold Medal, one of the highest honors in our profession." Applause erupted. Not polite applause, real applause, earned applause. And still, I had not yet entered the room. The whispers grew louder. "Where is she? Why isn't she here?" Margaret's voice cut through the murmurs. "I was told she was unwell." She set her gaze steady on my parents. But I spoke with her yesterday. She sounded stronger than ever. A heavy silence followed. The truth was undeniable. Their daughter was not an embarrassment. She was the reason this celebration existed at all. And just when the weight of their deception became unbearable, the Grand Oak doors opened. Every head turned, because at last I had arrived. The Grand Oak doors opened slowly. Every conversation fell silent. Every head turned, and for the first time in my life, I was not invisible. I stepped inside Whitmore Estate, not as an uninvited guest, but as the woman who had brought it back to life. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers illuminated the marble floors beneath my heels. Each step echoed with quiet confidence, steady and unhurried. I wore a midnight blue dress, simple, elegant, and timeless. I hadn't come to make a scene. I hadn't come for revenge. I had come because I belonged. Whispers rippled through the room. That's her, Colette Owens. She's the architect. 150 elite guests watched in silence as I walked through the foyer I had restored with my own hands. The chandeliers shimmered above me. The oak doors stood behind me like witnesses to the truth. Margaret Caldwell met my gaze and smiled with quiet pride. "You made it," she said softly. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. My parents stood frozen near the center of the room. My mother's champagne glass trembled, her polished smile dissolving into disbelief. My father's expression was rigid, the composure of a man unaccustomed to losing control. I stopped a few feet from them. "Mom, Dad," my voice was calm, gentle, but unwavering. "I received your message. I know I wasn't invited." My mother's lips parted, but no words came out. "But this building," I continued, gesturing around the grand foyer, "was my project. 18 months of my life. Every doorway, every window, every detail you've been admiring tonight, I restored them." Gasps spread through the crowd. My father cleared his throat, lowering his voice. "Colette," he said stiffly, "this isn't the time or place for family drama." I met his gaze. "No, Dad," I replied quietly. "It's the truth, and the truth has finally arrived." Vivian stepped forward, her voice sharp with frustration. "You always have to make everything about you," she snapped. "This is Mom and Dad's night." I held her stare. "I didn't choose tonight," I said calmly. "The American Institute of Architects did. The announcement was theirs, not mine." Judge Harrison, standing nearby, spoke with measured authority. "Then, perhaps the hosts should have acknowledged their daughter's extraordinary achievement," he said. "After all, we are standing inside it." A murmur of agreement swept through the room. My mother's carefully constructed composure crumbled. "We were only trying to protect you," she whispered. "These events can be overwhelming." I shook my head gently. "You told people I was mentally unwell," I said. "You told them I couldn't function. You told them I worked in construction because you were ashamed of who I am." Silence pressed against the walls. My father looked away. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Margaret Caldwell stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "it is my honor to formally recognize the architect responsible for restoring Whitmore Estate, Colette Owens." Applause erupted, filling the grand hall with a sound I had waited my entire life to hear. Not polite applause, genuine applause, earned applause. Margaret handed me an embossed envelope. "On behalf of the National Trust for Historic Preservation," she continued, "I am pleased to announce that Colette Owens has been selected to lead the restoration of the governor's mansion. The project is valued at $500,000. The applause grew louder. For the first time, I allowed myself to smile, not because my parents were watching, but because I had finally proven to myself that I was enough. As guests approached to congratulate me, my parents stood alone, their carefully curated reputation unraveling before their eyes. Conversations shifted away from them. Admiration followed me instead. Karma had arrived, not with cruelty, but with truth. Before leaving, I turned back to my parents. "I'm not here for revenge," I said gently. "I'm here because this place matters to me, and so does the life I've built." My voice softened. "I spent 10 years trying to earn your approval. I don't need it anymore." My mother's voice trembled. "Colette, we're proud of you." I offered a small, graceful nod. "Thank you," I replied, "but I learned to be proud of myself a long time ago." Then I turned and walked toward the entrance. As the oak doors opened once more, I paused, running my fingers lightly along the polished wood I had restored. The cool surface felt familiar, like a memory, like a promise fulfilled. For the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving in silence. I was leaving in dignity. Behind me, applause still echoed through the hall. Ahead of me, the future waited, bright open and entirely my own. Because my silence had never been weakness. It had been strength, patiently waiting for its moment to be heard. And that night, the world finally listened. From a professional standpoint, Colette Owens' story is not merely about success, it is about identity resilience and emotional liberation. As a specialist in human behavior and family dynamics, I have witnessed countless individuals spend their lives seeking validation from those incapable of giving it. The deepest wounds are rarely inflicted by strangers. They come from silence, neglect, and the quiet dismissal of one's worth by the people closest to us. What makes Colette's journey extraordinary is not her recognition by the American Institute of Architects, nor the prestige of restoring a historic estate. It is her decision to reclaim her dignity without cruelty, without revenge, and without losing her humanity. She did not destroy her family's reputation. She simply allowed the truth to be seen. And truth, when revealed with grace, has a way of restoring balance. Her story reminds us that self-worth is not granted by approval. It is built through perseverance, integrity, and the courage to stand alone when necessary. True success is not measured by applause, but by the quiet confidence of knowing you have honored your own path. Forgiveness, as Colette demonstrates, is not about forgetting. It is about releasing the weight of pain without surrendering your boundaries. Some doors may reopen with time, others remain closed, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. So if you have ever felt invisible, overlooked, or underestimated, remember this. You do not need permission to stand in the rooms you have built. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support allows us to share more powerful stories of truth, justice, and healing. And until our next story, remember, no one escapes the truth forever.